Hey, my name is Matt Holladay. I build heirloom surfboards. Been building boards for about 17 years, and I'm with you guys today from Fiberglass, Florida to show you guys about glossing. Okay, so a gloss coat, down to essentials. It's the final coat that goes on the board. It is a protective coat. It's the coat that everyone sees in a surf shop, and it's like the mirror polish, and it looks so beautiful. That's the gloss coat. If you start from the beginning, here's how it goes. Foam, shape the board, glass the board, hot coat the board, sand the board, gloss the board. Final. The most important thing that I could pass on today is cleanliness. In order to have a really nice gloss, your room, racks, the board, your hands, everything has to be extremely clean. Start by getting some fresh tape on my racks, and this is going to give a nice clean surface for the surfboard to lay on. Next thing that I'm going to do is set a level on my racks, and you want level racks. Anytime you're doing wet work or dry work for that matter, you want nice level racks. In this Florida heat, there's a lot of strange things that could happen when the temperature changes, humidity changes, boards can twist. So we want to be working with the best, the closest to perfect as we can. 100% of the time, I use a barrier. I never touch a board from the time that I shape it all the way to the time that I polish it. I never touch a board with bare hands. This is going to give you the best case scenario for having a fine looking gloss. This board was sanded last night, and no hands have touched this board since it's been sanded. So before you gloss, you want what I call a sterile surfboard. That's a board that's just had a sander taken off of it and never been touched by human hands. Even when I signed this board, I laid down a barrier like this, and then I signed the board. So next thing I'm going to do is tape off the deck. I'm going to shoot the deck first just because that's what I feel like doing today. Don't always have to do the deck first. You want to use good tape. This is really good tape. This is 233 plus from Fiberglass, Florida. This is 2727. It's a 3M product. Both these are 3M products. Both of them come from Fiberglass, Florida, and both of them will give you a good product when you're glossing. I'm going to tape low. That way, when I go to tape the deck, the seam is looking me right in the face, because I will have flipped the board and the seam will now be kind of high. You know, we're human, so it doesn't have to be perfect, but as close to perfect as you can get it, that's really what you want. You may notice I am mashing the tape down with my thumb. You really want to give it a good bond to the surfboard. The next thing I'm going to do is you want to get the tape hanging off the board like this. I'm moving left with my leading hand. I fold the tape, and with my following hand, I bend the tape a little bit. And this is how it looks. It ain't so beautiful, but this will ensure that the resin will fall to the floor. See, if you just give the tape a little crimp, it really stays up like that. One of the last things that I'm going to do is I'm going to give the board a final blow. While I've been working, walking around, even when I put my tape roll up earlier, a little speck of dust could have fallen down on the board. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a quick blow. I try not to be too overzealous with what I'm doing, but inevitably I do end up just going too far. This stuff doesn't give you much fuss at all. You apply it to the board, it lays down gorgeously, and there's not a lot of work that has to be done. So we're going to get to it right now. The board has been blown off. It looks beautiful. I'm very happy with it right now. I know that this bucket is clean inside because it has been upside down the whole time, and I can look in it and there's not a speck of dust. My brush, I use a 4-inch gloss coater from Fiberglass, Florida. You want to make sure that your brush starts in the clean acetone, along with the popsicle stick that you're going to use to stir the resin. It's actually these fine details that, if they're overlooked, you will get a flaw in your gloss. So, got that in there. Gloss resin from Fiberglass Florida comes with a little bit of wax in it already. And as it sits on the shelf, sometimes it'll float to the top. So I always give the gallon a good shake. And I'm gonna pour just about exactly what I need. Maybe a little bit more. You never want to run out. I find that you still need a little more surfacing agent. So that's this stuff right here, polyester wax solution. And for this, at this particular temperature and humidity, I've been doing this a long time, so I know I'm probably going to need a little more than a cap. So here's a cap, and maybe just half a cap, and maybe a full cap. Okay, one thing you want to make sure you do is stir the resin really well. I want you to stir the resin until you think you're done, and then stir it for another 15 seconds. Remember, it's the minor details that really count in your final coat. Remove all the acetone from my brush. And same with the resin. You want to shake this brush until you think all the acetone's out, and then shake it some more. You don't want any acetone getting into your gloss. Final thing that I'll do is I'll beat it up against the 2x4, and then I'll check to make sure that there aren't any loose hairs. If I could find one, I'll be glad to find it right now instead of on the board. Okay, so I have a clean brush. I have a clean popsicle stick. I'm going to take my hardener. I'm probably going to shoot it at about 25. So there's 25 cc's of hardener. Gloss resin takes a little longer to harden than normal laminating resin. Okay, and we're ready to apply. Very first thing I do is you never touch a squeegee or a brush dry to a surfboard. So let's get it wet. Just got it wet about an inch, inch and a quarter. Get all the air out of it. And now we're ready to pour. My first pour is down the stringer. And you want to make sure you're bending the bristles of the brush. So you are pushing the resin. You're really manhandling this resin. You don't want to leave a bunch behind. Remember, this is a thin coat. This isn't a very thick coat. You want to get it all the way down, very saturated, all the way to the tape. You don't want a bunch of dry spots at the tape where you barely made it down to the tape. You really want to saturate it. Okay, half the board is done. This half, I'll pour right at the edge of my first pour. And once again, bend those bristles good. I don't want to see any of this. Don't hold the brush like this. Hold it like a man, like this. And go ahead and push that resin along in a nice, steady, detailed manner. As you can see right now, the board looks pretty good, but it's not good enough. This is where we start our cross strokes. This is where we evenly distribute all those kind of ugly, thick areas where you may have left the resin a little bit deep. Maybe a little too much resin in some areas because we're human, you know. This is where we spread that out. I do a secondary cross stroke, which goes perpendicular to my first cross strokes. So here is the secondary cross strokes. You want to overlap each one. You don't want to make one pass right here and then another pass right here. At this point, you can also be looking for little brush hairs and any type of contamination that you may have gotten. Final strokes, brush stands up, and I don't apply a lot of pressure. So I'm not bending my bristles this time around. Once again, you want to overlap every stroke. You never want there to be a gap in between your two brush strokes. You want to keep a steady pressure too. So that means that as I'm traveling from nose to tail, I'm not pushing harder in certain areas or softer. Steady pressure. And just as quick as we started, we are done. That is a gloss coat. And the fun part begins after I clean my brush, because we get to watch it lay out really beautifully. It starts out a little rough looking, which you'll notice, but in the next 10-15 minutes, it's gonna lay out gorgeous. You'll see brush strokes all through this gloss, and you'll be thinking to yourself, this doesn't look great. And as time goes by, I'll just give the board a little tap. I'm allowing drips and excess resin to fall off the tape. And this is what I do, so take it or leave it. Okay, and the final thing we do, which I like to do right as the resin is going off, not when it's totally hard and not when it's still wet. I find the spot where I left my tape off. So find the beginning of your tape, and we're just gonna pull the tape like this, making sure you may be able to see some drips are falling off actually. So making sure you kind of get those drips heading towards the ground and not wrapping around to the bottom of the board. And after we pull this tape, what you're gonna be left with is a defined seam. But what we have is a defined seam. And when that seam is hard as a rock, I will go ahead and sand that seam so it's not that big of a bump. And then I'll do the exact same thing to the other side of the board. It's already getting nicer as we stand here. All right guys, well as you can see, we got a really nice gloss coat and it's on to sanding and polishing. I want to thank Fiberglass Florida for all my materials. I literally use only Fiberglass Florida materials when I'm building my boards. So if you guys need anything, check those guys out. And thank you guys so much for being with me today. Peace. Identified a little brush hair in here, and with two blades we're going to remove that little guy. Oftentimes I just put him right there on my glove. And then the way that you deal with that issue, because now that there's a big inconsistency in my gloss, I'll just go ahead and the low points, I got a low spot right here. So I'll put a teeny drop in there, and I see there's another low spot. So I'll get a little bit of wet resin, and I'll just drop it right in the low spot. And I see one more low spot. So we're going to fill this third low spot in, and then, there we go. And then, I'm going to go ahead and give the board another couple good whacks. That's going to allow those three dots to level out so they're not so high.